the report was created because here at Monograph, we feel like we have a responsibility, we have an accountability to the industry, and it's extraordinarily important to us to continue to like disclose information as soon as we get it. Our end goal is to be always to be in service to the industry. And that means a lot to me. And it means a lot to the organization that we did what we have to do to make sure that not just Monograph customers, but the broader landscape, the broader profession knows what's going on and the trends that we see, and suggest some of the strategies and tactics to help architects and architectural professionals navigate.
I think that outlines kind of the fundamental purpose of the report, but maybe talk about the timing of the report and some of the economic uncertainties that you guys see, and maybe also describe, if you can, why we're in this current uncertain state. Give us a timeline, because for most people who are listening, to architects and designers, they know that the economy is not great, but they might not necessarily understand how we got here.
We might need a whole podcast just about how we got here.
Give us the cliff notes.
And I want to see also if I can like make it simple enough and remove a lot of like the economic jargon that you might hear on like on Money or NBC or any of the news clips. So put simply, COVID happened. When COVID happened, the United States and among other governments decided to keep low interest rates extraordinarily low. Mm-hmm. What that did, though, was one, it ensured that the economy kept going during like a crazy time, global pandemic. What it fueled, though, was money was extraordinarily cheap. What people did with that money was they reinvested in, specifically for our profession, in architecture. A lot of it in residential. There was a big boom in renovations. There was a big boom in home prices. There was a big boom in buying real estate, particularly single family, because money was super cheap.
Gotcha.
Now, this was really exciting. What happened because of that afterwards was a lot of work for architects. Mm-hmm. A lot of work. And it was really, really exciting times. A lot of firms grew because the work exploded. What's happening now is COVID is winding down, and global governments are trying to increase interest rates now, and money is not as cheap. What that means is less people are spending it on assets like real estate, and the work is going to slow down. So that's kind of how it impacts this industry in particular. What's going to be moving on, generally speaking, is with inflation and prices going up and interest rates going up, the best way to describe it is go to the grocery store and, oh my God, eggs. I cannot believe how expensive eggs are. Mm-hmm. I cannot believe how expensive to buy groceries. That now impacts salaries. That now impacts scope of work. That now impacts fees. And because the work's also not coming in as fast, that also impacts how fast you look at your total employee size. Bolanle, like help me here. I think
so
to make it
so
as
I want
simple as I can.
No, it was actually perfect, and I hope that you could sense how simple Robert was trying to keep this very complex, uncertainty, challenges. Would I call it like landslide, right? It's from one thing to another that has happened over the last 3 years and is still continuing. So Robert, you did a fantastic job. And I think for me, maybe I can speak to the timing of the report. Mm-hmm. I found it extremely useful. So one, not just as a contributor, but as a firm leader who is trying to navigate all these, different issues that are coming up currently, right? And when you think about our industry, one of the things I really love about Monograph is who they serve, right? So yes, the content works for large firms, but large firms probably have machines that are producing, these data or crunching it, and their firm leaders are understanding internally what this report has done is made these topics that they've delved into accessible to small and mid-sized firm leaders in language we understand, right? So that's what Robert was key on expressing, right? Yes, there's a lot of big jargon, but like, how can you simplify the challenges that we've all faced, as well as provide solutions, ideas, opportunities, tools, the right tools and strategies, practical tools and strategies that we can implement unique to what our own firm is experiencing by this report. So the timing is actually critical, right? So we were all like head underwater in 2020, same in 21, then 22, right? Lots of work is happening. And everyone is like, okay, we need to go higher. We need to go do this and that and that. And now we're in this position in 23 where things might be taking a turn. Mm-hmm. And so any firm leader who has this report in their hand and is able to then, flip to the first section or to the third section or whatever section it is that they're trying to solve in their own unique environment, I think is so essential. So I want to really thank Monograph for taking the time out to serve us. For me, it was an opportunity to just, also serve my community.
That's fantastic. And Mancini Duffy is a larger size office, correct?
Yeah. So in terms of people, we're closer to 100. We have, our headquarters in New York and then 2 locations in Jersey. So everything that Robert's mentioning, I kind of had myself and my partners have had to lead, our firm and navigate this all through. So it has been very essential for me as I'm thinking through the issues that are coming up.
And you bring up a really good point that for larger size offices, there's the operations and the people there and the time in a way to have these conversations. And so the smaller offices, basically we get the benefit from hearing from offices like yourself. Yes. So maybe diving more into the report. So in what ways has the architecture profession and architecture offices been impacted by this kind of steep increase in work and with low interest rates and a kind of a decline right now with the amount of work happening? And I understand that the report is broken down into kind of 4 chapters, but so what are the ways that offices have been impacted?
David, where do you want us to start?
Let's start with the first one. So the report is interesting because the first chapter discusses clients and as a way to talk about architecture offices. So how you kind of mentioned it already, but how are clients impacted and how can an architect respond to their new position?
Well, Bolanle, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a first stab.
Yes, I'm your case study. No. Let's see what you share.
I want to make sure we have a really fun dialogue. What I want to do is make sure, anyone who's like listening to recognize that architecture is extraordinarily privileged professional industry. We are service providers, and the clients we serve typically have a high net worth. Like if that makes sense, that means like our clients have money.
Right, of course, yeah.
What's important to understand is we just talked about interest rates going up and the cost of material, cost of things going up. They're absolutely impacted. I think it's really important and extraordinarily wise for an architect and a business owner to be extraordinarily now closer than ever to your clients. You need to understand what is their financial position to understand the health of your project. Like because they're correlated. So like this is the best time if you've taken some time off over the last 2 years because it was just a lot of clients coming to you. This is the time to kind of like go back to them. Keep those relationships extraordinarily strong. Make sure that and they're comfortable that you are an ally and a partner in helping them realize the work that they're commissioning you to execute on. That's the best way to really start to navigate what might be choppy 6, 12, 24 months is to really have strong relationships with your current clients.
Yeah, 100% agree with it. I think for me, that is one of my philosophies as a firm leader. Yes, the work is there. We are all technical, but like, how are you handling your client relationships? Because it's people, right? We're in business with people. We're people doing businesses with other people, and so I think for us, even let me even take it back to the start of COVID when we all didn't even know what was going on. That was one of the first things that myself, my partners did with our clients, right? Key clients, no matter your size, we made sure that we reached out to them to let them know that we're willing to work through this period with them. And what that did for us, and then this is for any of your listeners, what that did for us was put us top of mind to our clients, right? So we were like, I'll take one, maybe they paid us in 30 days and they were like consistent in paying us in 30 days pre-COVID. But with everything happening, of course, that their whole payment cycle was affected. And we reached out to them to say, hey, listen, we understand what's happening. We know you might not be able to pay us in the same terms. We're willing to work with you. Let us know what is possible. So you know what happened when things turned around? That client remembered us, right? Because they knew that we valued the relationship, not just the work that we could get them, but the actual relationship of them also trying to navigate these uncharted waters that none of us had ever experienced. So, Robert, I think for us in our firm, over the last 3 years, it has just been essentially doubling down on that, right? Doubling down on the relationships. For me personally, one of the things that I preach, not just as firm-wide, but within my group, is you have to know your counterpart. Who's your counterpart on the other side? As an accountant, right? As a project accountant, who is on the payable side? And how can you form a relationship so that if there's any issues when it comes to cycles, payment cycles, all of that stuff, you know who to reach out to. Same thing with our project managers. I also do that same relationship management, right? So you might say, oh, she's a CFO and she should just be stuck in the numbers. But no, a good portion of my job is, working on those relationships, forming them, because they just bring you top of mind to your clients, knowing that beyond just the work, you actually care about them. Not a lot of people approach things this way, right? You might not hear the word care, but really and truly, that's how it is. And I've seen the difference, with a client who feels cared for, who feels that you're invested in them. I've seen what it does to our bottom line. I've seen how it brings reoccurring work for us as a firm. And so, Robert, yeah, I agree.
I think those are interesting points because the human side of it, the human relationships, the care, those kinds of words and descriptions, I think sometimes for all professions, but maybe in particular architects, because our job is, we wear a lot of different hats and it's very technical, it's easy to get consumed by the work and to prioritize the project, the building that we're doing, almost more than anything else, because that's our first passion in a lot of cases, more so than having relationships with people. We tend to be kind of introverted sometimes, actually. And I think also maybe for some folks listening, there's this, I think it's very easy for the maintaining relationships to sound like this wishy-washy, yeah, but is that going to give me any kind of return? It's not as firm of an action as, well, if I'm working on the building, I'm drawing lines, then that's real. But going to get to lunch with people, calling them up, like, what does that actually do?
David, I don't agree, because they're paying your invoice. Like the ROI is really clear. Like, yes. They're paying your invoice, and I do want to make it clear. Like, I'm not asking, at least in this particular topic, to go out and look for new work. I think that we should touch on that. Like, what I'm establishing here is, like, you already have clients. Their ROI is very clear. There's a trust. They trusted you. They believed in you. They are now paying you. What I'm asking is, make sure that relationship is strong. If we've learned anything from 2008 and 2009, is I don't like surprises.
Sure.
Like, I really don't want to be surprised. And I want to be empathetic enough if their financial situations are not great, I'd rather know earlier than later. And I'd rather work together on a solution than not. So I do disagree that the ROI is very clear when we're talking specifically about clients, because they pay your invoice.
I like the note that Bolanle mentioned of even internally with an office for yourself, probably everyone in the office, this deeper understanding and establishing a connection with the person who's sitting across from you is important. Because if you don't have that, there's no way to actually have any kind of partnership or communication if there's not that kind of understanding. But it does take time and effort to try and seek that information or to establish that connection. It doesn't naturally, I mean, some folks are, I think, naturally that way, maybe. But in a lot of cases, you have to work at it, right? It takes some level of commitment to do that.
Yeah, I agree. 80%, maybe that's a huge number, but we're all in teams in different studios. You're dealing with folks and people on your team daily. And I think recently in our organization, we had a workshop. And one of the things that came up in that workshop was this idea of trust, right? When you look at studios that are performing excellently and some studios that are, maybe suffering or not doing as well financially also, right? The project isn't going well, the studio isn't doing well. A lot of times what it boils down to is that feeling of safety and trust. Mm-hmm. Can you trust that this person is going to complete the task that you've assigned in the week? Do they trust that if they're not able to do it, can they go to their leader and discuss a path out or a path forward? Can they begin to have those kinds of conversations within their teams? And what that essentially trickles down to, now if we get a little bit more technical, is back to the whole, scope creep, going over time, managing the project properly so that the project manager can be a bit proactive in addressing these issues, right? All baseline, it boils down to trust within your group, right? So while I can, understand that it's sometimes it doesn't come naturally to some folks, if you're a studio leader or you're moving up, you're going to have to start working on that side. You're going to have to nurture the teams that are under you, or the 1 year out of school architect that doesn't even understand how to process those emotions in the workplace, right? So I say as you're moving up, you're going to have to start addressing those things. And so I've seen it in terms of the studios within our organizations that are doing extremely well. They're growing. Even in this particular time of economic uncertainty, they're actually really pretty steady. Projects are flowing. They're leaning, their existing client pool within that studio, they keep coming back. They're paying invoices. All of those things that are coming out. So back to the whole conversation around ROI, we're seeing it happen real time, where it's almost like, yes, everything, there's a lot of noise happening around, but this, several studios are doing really well. And it goes back to, doubling down on that trust. They trust each other in their studios. They trust each other to be able to do excellent work and serve their clients well. And we're seeing it affect the bottom line.
Oh, that's fantastic. And we could talk, I think, the rest of the day on this topic, but we should move forward.
Yeah.
So obviously the next big topic of how this has all been impacted and why is the financial and the money. And one of the aspects that Robert, you mentioned was inflation, right? And so how do offices cope or deal with that change when everything's becoming more expensive?
What and if the price of eggs goes up, does that mean that the price of an architect should go up as well?
Proportionally to the percentage of eggs, yeah.
Short answer, yes. At the end of the day, you need to make a little bit more money to pay for more expensive eggs.
That's a good point.
All right, next topic.
Are you going to eat less eggs? If you hold your fees at the current rate, are you going to eat less eggs?
Robert, I'm trying to get my son to eat less eggs. He's 7 years old, and he's eating 2 eggs just like the rest of us in this house. I need him to eat less. I know this is an architecture podcast, but here we are talking about eggs.
Let's talk about eggs.
I love it.
but one would think that, okay, well, the inflation, is going on, and our clients maybe are struggling. So is it reasonable and fair for us to raise our prices when everything is already, really hard? In some ways, I think it makes sense, because if everything goes up, like, we need to be able to follow and survive ourselves. But how do you implement raising your fees, to current clients or new clients, and, not make it worse than
the
maybe
uncomfortable
it is for them?
conversation?
Yeah.
So we first established, yes, your rates have to go up.
Yeah.
We've also established that, yes, these conversations are going to be difficult.
Yeah.
Let's acknowledge that as being strong leaders and strong business owners, one of our core responsibilities is to have difficult discussions, either internally or externally. It is part of your job description. So yes, it is going to be hard. And I think every firm owner is going to have to find ways to navigate those tough discussions, but that doesn't mean you don't do it. Like, working out is hard. you still do it. I still like eggs. I still have to wait in line and pay for my eggs. Tough discussions have to occur. And I think specific strategies in terms of like where, when, and how you raise rates. Well, we often spend another podcast just on that. It is also really hard because I don't want to speak completely generally, because I know a lot of practices have different philosophies and methodologies in how they look at billings. So I want to make sure that everyone hears that, like, what we might talk about might not apply to every firm.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. I think the simplest thing you can do, new projects, new rates.
Yeah.
Because clean cut. Existing projects, I got to read the contracts, and we get into like very specifics that might not apply to every practice. But the best thing that you can do that's really simple is not all new projects. It's a new rate.
I think that's valuable advice. So again, case study here, practical. One of the things I think that we did or are constantly doing is, just analyzing our existing pool of current clients and who can you have those conversations with, right? So we are constantly like pushing ourselves to make sure that we're not shying away from the discussions, because at the end of the day, you're just hurting yourself, you're hurting your people. It makes it difficult for me to do my job when, my studio leads come and say they need to raise, give salary increases, or we need to like upgrade to this new amazing tech. All of those things cost money. And our primary source of income is from our projects, right? That's where we're getting revenue from. So it's really like looking at your current pool of clients. Who have you developed good relationships with? Who do you need to start having those relationships with? Because if it's somebody, like Robert said, you haven't spoken to them one-on-one in a while, you need to start taking those steps. You're going to know which ones you can approach and say, hey, listen, we've reassessed our rates. We've now made XX percentage increase in our rates. This is what's coming this year. Sometimes clients even appreciate that you're giving them a heads up. Yeah. Be it you have an additional service that's coming up on a project and the rates are changing a little bit. Sometimes you can just put in that buffer and you just never know. It's possible that they won't even buck because you've provided value. Right? You've provided value. You're able to also communicate that value clearly to them. A lot of times you will see that they will be able to go back and figure out where they are finding dollars from. Right. So I think that's one way, firms can look at who they're currently serving and who they can begin to have these conversations with. And it's the age-old issue, right? Like forever, the fees have always remained the same. Everyone's always afraid to make these changes, but we have to start somewhere. Yeah. And then, it'll trickle down.
I think that's both really, really good points. One, I do like the mentality of, we decide, okay, do we need to raise the fees? Yes. Okay, well, that's the decision. 2, is it going to be awkward? Yes. But so what? Okay, then how do we do it? And I think, Bolanle, what you're saying too, it goes directly back to the previous topic of that relationship, right? If you've maintained that relationship to the degree that you've described, then for sure, it's much easier to then call them up or have them over coffee or whatever, however the meeting happens, and have awkward conversations and say, look, listen, obviously the inflation is increasing. And for our office, it would make a big difference if X, Y, and Z things. I can see where that conversation would be much easier. Whereas, and on one hand, if you had that relationship, and if you didn't, and you just called them up and start asking for more money, they're going to be like, "Why would I help you give more money? There's no trust or connection here. I'm already paying you, and you're just asking for more. And there's nothing. You don't have that ground underneath, the common ground of trust."
Yes, I agree.
That's why that was chapter 1.
Yeah, I see. Okay, yeah, it's coming back now.
Build the relationship. I do want to make sure that Bolanle says something that's really, really important that might get skipped. Is no one likes surprises. So when you do that, you're not changing fees immediately.
Right.
You're saying like 3 months from now, 2 months from now, 6 months from now. Like you have to give people enough time to essentially digest and see that this is coming. Like the worst way to deliver increase of fees is effective immediately. Yeah. Like that's the worst way to deliver news. And that doesn't work also in terms of like supporting that relationship. Because like in a relationship, no one likes surprises. Yeah. Like, great, you're telling me your fees are going to go up? When? Like the answer should not be today. Right? The answer should be like, based on these criteria this far out, I'm just giving you enough head notice. This also gives us a lot of time to plan, both parties, to get our ducks in a row and prepare for those increases in rates. It's really important. I'm going to repeat, it is not effective if you say effective immediately. Like that's not how you do it.
No, that's a very, very good point.
Well, it goes back to that trust, right? Like you wouldn't corner people like that. Like if you care for them and about what they do and who they are, like you would give them a heads up as a courtesy in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just also to add, right? We're not trying to create this like utopian world, right? We're bringing things down to reality, and the reality is you might approach, an example is you might approach a client and they might say, well, sorry, but at least, the way I see it is now you've practiced that muscle.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
On to the next one. Now it's no longer awkward, right? You've gotten over the awkwardness. It's now time to again, really think about your business, the direction your business is going in, how you want to drive growth if you're growing, and how you want to run a profitable organization, right? So you've now gotten over the hump, you move on to the next one.
You touched on something very interesting here, is that you're always scared of the first fail, right? Like we don't raise our rates because we're afraid that somebody's going to say no. And then what's going to happen? It's deception. Like you didn't get what you wanted. You didn't do well. And I think you're right. Like once you have the first one or the first project you lose or the first clients who puts the project on hold, well, that's it. You kind of get that it's part of the job, right? And you get over it.
Yeah. Yes, I completely agree. And that's also because, again, reality, they could have set a budget.
Yeah.
There are set fees, whatever it is, you just don't understand, how they're financially driving the project. So you can't get that no. Actually, you should even expect to get that no. You can't expect that 100% of your clients are going to be like, yay, whoop-de-doo. You should expect it, but at least as an organization or as a leader, you've gotten over that hump of dealing with an awkward situation when it comes to asking for money. And I want to say this I see in all aspects, asking for payments on your invoice, asking, and I'm sure we'll go into that further, but people are always wary when it comes to discussing money.
Yeah.
Right. And so you just have to, you want to be a leader, you got to go through it. It's something that you have to go through.
It does get easier. The more you do it, it does get easier.
Yes.
What might be useful for everyone is also have a framework. If you're really nervous, maybe start with, and you can pick two different ways. You can start with the person you trust the most as a client, or you can start with, like, let's say your smallest project where it might be the hardest and the relationship really isn't there. There's no wrong or right answer.
Yeah.
But I think like being thoughtful in how you're going to approach it does matter.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more on self-reflection. Like I personally operate on momentum. the more momentum I am, the bigger my ego gets, and the more like things like life gets easier for me. So I generally start with the win. Like I know a certain amount of clients that have a really good relationship. I'm fairly, let's say, not 100% sure they're going to say yes, but I'm like 80 to 90% sure they're going to say yes. And I'm going to get that win. It builds momentum. It builds confidence. And then I take that to the next call.
I think these are really, really good points, especially for the smaller size offices where the office leader is wearing all of these different hats, which is the challenge of being any small business versus, larger companies. They have people like Bolanle who are very good, and they're CFOs. A lot of small offices, they're CFO, CEO, chief designer, they're everything. I was going to say also, I imagined for longer term projects. So, even custom houses take 5 years now, but for large scale work of a large office like Mancini Duffy, that you guys must have this question of increasing the fees, even when it's not 2023, because inflation generally it goes up. And if the span of a project I don't know how long the projects take at Mancini Duffy, but let's say 6 years or something like that, right? That is a long time, with or without, again, the strange kind of economic uncertainty. So I don't know if it's a question, but I guess is this something you guys have to practice on a regular basis?
Oh, ongoing.
Yeah.
It's ongoing. It's a constant, I won't call it battle. I won't call it fight, right? Tussle.
Yeah.
To give you the right word, right? Between, our principals, our project managers, understanding who the client is, understanding how you can go into, proposals and bids, also thinking about your competitors, like all of that factors into it. And, there are certain projects as we are, deciding what we're going after, we know the ones that we can, go in, put our unique selling point, which is our design lab, talk about how we are really doing things at our company and sticking to the number that we put in, right? Because what that does sometimes, depending on who the client is that it begins to filter out who your core client is, right? Of course, again, you want to have a spread because it's not every time you do the nice and shiny,
sure.
But you begin to see trends, right? You begin to see who your true core client is. And then you start going after more people or more clients like that, doing more projects like that. So yeah, we're constantly thinking about it. We're constantly, the principals are constantly having to put up their boots and be able to again clearly communicate this value that we're trying to provide to our clients, not just work-wise, but from why you should pay us what we're worth, not just because of what the industry dictates it should be.
Yeah.
It's ongoing. I wouldn't say we've figured it out. It's all good. No, because again, you're serving existing current clients that are historical, right? Like they've been clients to long-standing clients, and then we have our new ones. I will say, though, let me quickly go back to your point on multi-year. In the proposal, one of the things that we try to make sure we do is build in an inflation percentage, right? So if we know it's going to go year over year, you have to write that into the contract.
That's great. Yep.
Yeah. That we'll be reviewing our rates, and there's a potential. Again, I'm not saying numbers because sure. I'm not your CFO. So please,
do you want to be?
Well, I mean your audience, right? So please speak to your financial professional if you have one, but determine what that percentage should be and make sure it's written into your proposal.
Yep. That's fair. That was the next thing I was going to say is that there's always first of all, there's a distinction, but there's a difference between what's in a contract versus what's going to happen.
Yes.
But still, I think it's a really good point in the contract, and if you're reviewing the contract proposal with the client, kind of going through it, to have that in there. And that is something that I don't know. I don't know how many architects are quite aware of, but it's important to have it in there if you can. To at the very least, sort of going back to what I think Robert was saying of bringing up this subject before it has to take place, so people aren't completely blindsided. when you talk about it. Moving on to the next topic is time, but more specifically that during COVID, when there was a lot of work, there wasn't enough time to do their work, right? Where everyone's working over hours. But now there's, assuming, let's say, projects have slowed down or folks have lost a few projects, there's an excess of time and there's kind of a lot of staff. So how do offices deal with this, the up and down of having not enough time and then too much time on their hands?
Time is really important. Like, I think it's important for architects to understand, as professional service providers, the best way for you to get, let's say, a gauge in how things are going in much closer time, like before the books are closed, like on a day by day, week by week cadence, is really understanding your time. What we see here at Monograph is, one, as you talked about, projects, they take a long time. A lot of those projects are still now ongoing. What you might not be doing is continuing to staff for more future projects. I think this is a really important time to essentially think about, well, efficiency of time is now more top of mind. And it's less about the lack of time, because I believe a lot of projects are still very active. But it's really understanding now you have pressure from one direction, which is interest rates. You have another pressure where, like, you might not get as many new projects coming through the door, but you still have your current active projects. So what you work on now internally is the efficiency of that time. And you have to, like, be very thoughtful in terms of, like, is the team efficient? Where are the lack of efficiencies? There are a lot of firms that don't even track time. Then I start to pull my hair a little bit. It's like,
that makes sense. That's your Monograph.
So Robert is getting patches in his hair.
I'm very biased. It is where Monograph starts, because you just have to understand. You have to know. The fact that you don't know actually does not set you up for any type of preparation for what is next to come. You're extraordinarily prone to surprises when you don't track. So first objective, track. Second objective, if you do track, question the authenticity of that data set. Is it clean? How much ambiguity is in that data? I know when I was an architect, I lied on my hours all the time. The systems in place and the culture in place encouraged me to lie. So be, as a firm leader, be honest with yourself. Is that the culture of the firm? The hours that I'm looking at, is it true? How much variability is in those numbers? The next thing you can do is, if it is true, great. Now you have patterns and you have a clear understanding of efficiency. If it's not true, there's other things you have to do to start fixing that, because you do not know what the gap is.
Right.
Those are the few things that come top of mind when I think about time.
So happy to say we do all of this. I mean, Robert's good book.
Yes.
Robert's good book. Oh my God, Robert is speaking my jam. I say finance. Actually, I named the presentation this. I say finance, numbers is the nth sense of design.
Yeah.
Interesting.
If you cannot, this is a play on Sixth Sense. I was like, oh, this sounds like a really good topic title. But really and truly, it really does start with your time, right? The way you build your projects and your project fee is, you think about how much time it's going to take you to complete, right? So yes, you could get a fee per square footage, but then we actually have to now say, well, who's going to be on this project? How long is it going to take? How many hours do they have to work? And when you build this schedule, real life happens. So is it really unfolding as it should? And in every single architecture firm I've worked at, our one issue is always getting timesheets. In fact, we've been it's a constant, like, how are we going to make sure that our employees on a weekly basis, so we do time every week, how are we going to make sure that I can get their time in a timely manner so that I can then take this data and scrub it and produce it for my PMs, or if you're a solopreneur, or a smaller, under 10, right?
Right.
Let's say you're under 10 firm. How can the leader begin to review these numbers to be able to see trends, patterns, issues, opportunities that can arise by paying attention to your numbers, right? And so for me, I always say, like, for me, I'm very quickly able to tell if a project is in trouble or not without knowing what stage they're in, like what is happening. I have no clue what you guys are drawing. But without knowing that, I can quickly tell and raise flags, and my team raise flags to a PM if there are issues that I think might be arising, right? So you cannot fix, so you cannot course correct what you're not tracking, right? So one of the things that we do, a practical example, one of the things we do is we look at our forecast versus actual, right? We say, okay, we forecasted this week, where did the person actually come in? Do they understand how their hours are affecting their efficiency or their productivity, right? Because there's the education piece that has to happen for the folks on your team to buy into this vision of, we're doing our project, but we want it to be successful financially, right? So you're not overloading them with, like, if you work 12 hours rather than 10, you're in trouble. No, it's not about that, but it's just understanding a bit more how it just ties into the entire project success, right? So we do something called a time analysis report, where we look at billable versus non-billable, right? So if there's project slowdown, we're looking at how much time in a studio or a team folks are charging to non-billable work. And is it non-billable work that will help their team? Are they working on something, let's say, for talent, or something in technical standards, right? All these things that can help the general initiatives that are happening within within an organization. And so we look at that time analysis, right? And then everything is all pattern. The other thing also, if you want to focus on efficiency, if you're not tracking that time, you don't know how to help maybe like a junior project architect who is struggling. Maybe they don't really understand how to design the task that they were given. But if you're not looking at it, you're just mad, like, this person isn't delivering whatever it is that you had asked them to do, not knowing that they're just either wasting time, or you could have fixed this 3 weeks ago at the start of the month. You get to the end of the month and you're like, oh my goodness, we've spent XX amount of hours when we were only supposed to spend whatever you had decided. So it's highly critical that if you don't do anything, if you're not tracking your time, do this for me and Robert.
Track your time.
And
do this for me and Robert.
At minimum, a spreadsheet. Like, it does not require high tech. It's muscle. Practice that muscle so you can get clarity. So you can make those adjustments. Architecture is like I think of it as like a big Titanic, right? Architectural projects are really, really big, and it's easier to make small movements on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, and it's a lot harder to make monthly or quarterly movements because it's a really big ship. And you can only do that if you track time, so you know where to make those course corrections, and you want to do it faster than like a monthly or quarterly basis, because it is the Titanic. Like, it's really hard to say, go this way now, but you're like already 2 months behind. So I love the fact that Bolanle said at least the weekly cadence in terms of understanding where time is. A lot of Monograph customers, we go down to the day.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because it's really not like, the tighter you can go, the better, because then you can make small changes and they're not like massive changes to course correct.
It's funny. Yeah. You were going to say something, Marina?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, timesheets are great. And I think it's important to emphasize on that for like the firm leaders, but also, as you mentioned, for the employees. I mean, we've been employees ourselves and we did fill out timesheets every week. And you lie sometimes on your hours because you're afraid that if you show that you haven't been productive this week, you're going to get fired, right? But it's not but actually it's not the point of the exercise. And I think employees who listen to this episode should understand the importance of being accurate in filling their timesheet to help the business they're part of, really. It's not like a self-evaluation of your performance. That's not it. It's how is the business healthy, or does the business needs to change?
I mean, Go ahead.
Sorry, even for the employee, it's not even maybe the business, right? Because maybe it's so big to them. It's like this one little project that I'm working on, right? Like that is that is your business, right? So you're the CEO of your career, and here's a project that you've been assigned to work on. Think about it that way.
Yeah.
Right. And like, how is my contribution to this project going to help this project turn out well? Right. Baseline. That's what it is. And so that's why I kind of go back to that education piece, right? If the project manager or whoever is leading, right? See, whoever is above senior project architect, if they can just take some time up front, or if the project has already started happening, this moment, just schedule some time to make sure that your teammates understand really what's happening. And if they have any questions, you're able to help them work through it. You're going to see a difference. I see it all the time. I've seen it, and I've been in the industry 16 years as a project accountant, and now, on a firm-wide position as a CFO. I've seen the impact it has when you take out that time and just explain it to your teammates or folks who are working on, in your company. I've seen how, what the ripple effects are when it comes to just understanding and delivering better to your clients.
Education, communication, it's so important. So everyone knows what are the constraints. I'm like, I've been in architecture for a long time, and the one thing I do know for a fact is architects are extraordinarily good working with constraints. So like, let's just call out, here are the constraints. We want to do great architecture. Here's the budget. Here's the timeline. Here are the deliverables. Here are the constraints. Let's execute on great work, but also acknowledge that there are constraints with everything we do. I think that's going to drive amazingly well as long as it continues to be, as you said, Bolanle, like communication, education, and that all rolls up to chapter 1, relationships. Like, sure. So like you build a relationship where like if you're a PM, you're mentoring, you're coaching, you're disclosing information, you're teaching how they can level up and one day be a project architect or a project manager. And the next level up, CFO or the CEO, needs to also continue to do the same to their associates and junior partners. Like, this is how you look at the business at a higher level. This is how you build relationships to build a pipeline for future work, business development. These are best practices in how to like establish relationships, establish context when rates do go up. Going back to the earlier chat.
There's a lot of good points to touch on for sure. I did want to ask a specific question, which is, Bolanle, you mentioned scrubbing timesheets. And for, again, the smaller practices who are listening, they might be wondering, like, how the hell do you scrub a timesheet? How do you know whether or not it's accurate?
Patterns, yeah.
I mean, I think, when you... So I'm actually glad that you brought that up, because that's one of the things that I was thinking about as we're having this conversation, is that, maybe there's a smaller, again, 2 to 3, less than 10, who's like, I don't have to deal with these issues.
Right.
My project is done in 6 weeks. But the habits that you start now and that you start when you're smaller will just amplify as you're growing, if you want to grow. Right. And so it doesn't matter your firm size. Foundationally, you have to make sure that you have these, again, habits in place. Right. So as a small business owner, a small firm owner, you begin to track time. If you don't, I notice that I always see that sometimes small firm owners are like, we're not tracking. No, start tracking it. And Robert, I do agree with you. It's daily, right? So our weekly timesheet is broken down by day. Right. So, begin to just look and see where you're spending your time. A lot of us make up stories in our heads. We say, we're so busy. It's going to take us this long to complete this task. But when you actually start documenting, you're going to be able to see again or scrub what's really real and what's not.
Right.
Where you're expending your time, how you're serving your clients, how you're working within your organization. If you're wasting your own time by spending too long on a task that can probably take you shorter, you cannot fix any of those things if you don't have the habit of looking, and you can't look if you're not tracking.
Yeah.
So I want to say, don't be fooled by size. If you have bad habits as a small firm, if you want to grow, it's just going to amplify.
This is true. This is true.
The complexities that comes, as you're growing, is just going to be horrible.
Yeah.
So I say you're in the best position.
Yeah.
You're in the best position if you're small. Put this in. I don't care if it's 40 hours. You get to the end of the week and you're like, yes, this is what I did. It's on one line, and I spent 8 hours a day. That's fine.
Right.
The thing about business is there's always fluctuation, right? No season is like constant and perfect. Things are going to happen. We've seen that happen over the last three plus years, or from eternity, from when businesses have started. So you don't think that in your business, if things are just nice and smooth and perfect right now, that you might not experience. I'm not calling challenges on you, but there might be something that fluctuates.
Sure.
Your business pattern. And if you don't already have these mechanisms in place, it's just going to cause you issues. So you're being proactive at best.
Mm-hmm.
I love the word mechanisms, processes, systems. Like, if you're a small firm, it's the best time to start investing and build that muscle. If you don't want to scrub, here's a plug for Monograph, because that's kind of what we do. But it's really, really important. But what I want to touch on, I get a lot of these questions from small firms. How much do I charge? What should my fees look like? I was like, you will have a really good idea if you track your own time. Like, the fact that you're asking me is probably because you don't track and you're trying to essentially peg yourself to an average with everyone else. And that's not the right way to look at the problem. Everyone solves problems and goes through a design process slightly different. You need to understand what it takes you to go through a design process. And the best way to do that is to lean on your own trend and your own data. It's really hard for me to say, like, oh, Robert, can you tell me how much I should charge? Like, hey, I don't know. Like there's market conditions, there's like site specifics, there's microeconomics. I don't know how well you perform. I don't know where you're strong. These are all questions that starts to get answered if you just kind of track your own time, and you can lean on that to essentially rewrite future proposals, and really identify scope creep early on.
Yep.
It starts with the basic exercise, track your time.
And I think there is kind of like a heritage of the architect being the designer and not a business person. Therefore, we're kind of like
tracking time. I don't do that.
Just using this as an excuse not to have to dive into the business part of our business. But I think, in today's world, like, we have to understand how this works in order to be profitable, in order to keep going. We can't just be like, the fancy designer who wears black and draws cool stuff. Like, we have to make sure it could be a business.
There's definitely a cultural aspect of architecture, which is probably a different topic, but that exists for sure. I know we're
spicy. Don't be a business owner then.
Yeah.
Well, no, this is true. This is true.
It's true. Yeah.
It's true. And we were saying the other day that different architects go off and have their own practice for various reasons. And sometimes it's because they want to be chief designer. That's great if you want to do that, but you also have to acknowledge that's not the only thing you're going to be doing. And if you have employees, it's kind of irresponsible, honestly.
Yes.
If you don't do the things we're describing. I know we're pretty much out of the time, but if you guys are okay, I did want to talk about the challenges of staffing. Again, when there's a bunch of new work coming in, it's very tempting to hire as many people as you can to do all the work and accept all the projects. And then when things cool down, you're left in the situation where you may have too much staff. So maybe kind of briefly, how do offices cope with this continual challenge of the misalignment between the staff and then the project requirements?
Well, I think one of the disadvantages of architecture is that it takes a long time. One of the advantages of architecture is that it takes a long time. So I think what's great about that, and what I'm trying to get at, is when you know that when the phone is not ringing as much, but you still have a lot of active projects, you can kind of conclude that the level of staff you have now might not be the right amount of number 12 months from now. Like it's not immediate. So like as a firm owner, you have a couple choices. Do I invest in business development now to make sure I shore up 12 months later? I would choose that decision and acknowledge that now I have to work a little bit harder to go chase work and build that work pipeline and not just expect people to come to me as it was the last 2 years. And if I do that, I'm taking care of my team. And we don't have to have this discussion 12 months later in terms of a reduction in workforce. You can also take the other approach where like, I'm not going to do that. Well, then you're going to face a challenge where you are going to be underwater in 12 months. And then you're going to have to also acknowledge that that's something that's difficult for a firm to do. And that's probably what you will have to do if you do not essentially shore that up 12 months later. Like, remember, our disadvantages are sometimes also our advantages. Nothing in architecture really happens that quickly.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure there are no surprises, acknowledge, and then put in make a decision and take action on what you want to do next.
Yeah, I'd like to contribute to that. I think, the way we think about it is like a funnel, right? And, in a funnel shape, yes, work is flowing, but you kind of have to look at the top of your funnel, which is what Robert is talking about in terms of your 6 to 12 month outlook. And if activity there is like light, then, the folks who are in charge of BD need to make sure they're working, right? You want to always make sure that your funnel is filled. Again, to the best of what you can control, right? Nobody planned to have COVID, but here we are. But within, now that we're coming out of it and we're in this season, yes, it's still uncertain. There are things you can do, which is continue to look at your client relationships and fill that funnel. Don't think that because below in the funnel, work is flowing, everyone is busy. Make sure you're keeping an eye on that, right? That is why, again, your numbers, looking at billing projections, looking at the pipeline, all of those things are important because you know what is coming. I like what Robert said about time, because it's not just going to all of a sudden surprise you like how it did surprise us in 2020, right? Like in a regular course of business, you kind of are able to tell. One of the things that we have done at MD is something called, like, our studios are run in something called a heartbeat. So our PMs on their own, like brainstorming and thinking about like talent and what the right balance of a studio makeup is, how much they can generate per year, understanding what their current, projects that they're working on and planning out that billing projections. They've been able to determine what the heartbeat, we call it our Mancini heartbeat, what each studio should be and how much they can bear or not, looking at the current projects that they have.
Gotcha.
So it's taken years to develop, right? None of this happened overnight, right? It's understanding, looking at trends in the studios, knowing when a heartbeat needs to break off, right? And form another team. All of this work that we've done so that we understand what it takes to support. And within that heartbeat, if things slow down, because they're paying attention to their projections, they know when things will pick back up. They know when maybe they can lend resource to another team that might be a little bit underwater. All of this, various heartbeats that we've developed, it actually looks like a heartbeat. It's so, like, I was so blown away when they came. That's the other thing I want to talk about, leaning into the amazing folks that you've hired, right? Everything doesn't just all reside in the firm leaders, right? Because they are there working day in, day out, very closely with the project, so they know. So firm leaders also have to pay attention to these people that we've trusted to help us in our businesses. And this idea of the heartbeat kind of came about from our people, and we've now sort of adopted it across our different studios. So yeah, I think this has just been great.
That's fantastic. I love the heartbeat. That's great. A lot of really remarkable things covered. Thank you both so much for taking the time on this. Oh, you have a question?
No, I wanted to say, where can our listeners find the report?
Oh,
might be good.
Well,
That's right.
yeah.
Please.
It's on our website. David, maybe share the link too.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the description.
Because I'm not going to remember the exact URL. If you don't want to go to the link, you can also email me. It's really easy to reach me. It's Robert@Monograph. And just say you want the report, and I'll send you the PDF.
Yeah, boom, there we go. For people who are lazy, don't want to click on a link, you can over ask Robert for
Just go bug Robert.
But thank you both so much for taking the time on a Friday?
We are,
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. On a Friday morning and afternoon for Bolanle. And Monograph, thanks to Monograph for doing this report, and Bolanle for your contributions. This was, I think, very, very insightful, and I hope that it will spur on further conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for watching this video on YouTube. If you like what we're doing, then please support our show by hitting that subscribe button and liking and commenting on our videos.
You can also find us on most of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're mostly on Instagram. And you can reach out to the hotline, 213-222-6950. You can send a text message or leave a voicemail if you have any reaction to this recording, any questions you might have, or guest suggestion. Feel free to send it our way.
Cool. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.